Rewound Radio, DJ Hall of Fame.
This is Alan Sniffin live at Rewound Radio, and on the Rewound Radio line, the voice you've been listening to for the past 3 hours at Rewound Radio, it's the nearly famous Brian Wilson.
Alan Sniffin, boss jock of Rewound Radio. How are you?
Yeah, the only jock, and that's not true. We got a couple of other people here at Rewound Radio, but I'm great. How does it feel? How does it feel listening to your own show from 37 years ago?
Well, hang on one second here. I'm what the hell? Oh, I'm picking up some good vibrations. They're giving me excitations.
That's right.
Actually, it's a kind of strange, kind of nostalgic, especially since I always hated listening to air checks. Hated them. I don't know why. The commercials were okay, I guess, maybe because I was getting paid extra for that. But I just never really got into listening to air checks. Although they were force fed by some program directors I won't name, and they were moderately instructive. But it was always difficult for me because I was listening to what I said, listening to what I did, listening to what the electricity in the room was at the time, trying to recreate it in my mind, and invariably I'd come to the conclusion that I could have done that a lot better. That was not right. This could have been better here. The levels were off over here. Ross stepped on me. I stepped on myself. Whatever. And so it just wasn't all that pleasurable. But I got to tell you, listening to all this is kind of nostalgic. The great thing is that I don't remember any of this. I don't remember a bit of it. Largely because for 30 some odd years I never listened to the air check. So it's been kind of entertaining. Some of that WJBO stuff was a little painful, but
I don't agree with that. I thought that WJBO air check was terrific. In fact, I mean, not to criticize anybody too much, but I actually thought that the WJBO air check that we ran first was in some ways better than the WABC air check, in that you guys were so spontaneous on that show.
Yeah, they that venue allowed for that. The fact that in February, November, we'd only been together for 90 days about when that tape. And I don't even know who made that tape. Making air checks of yourself just wasn't that wasn't the big thing to do back then that I know of. I mean, California Air Check made a pretty nice living selling stuff like that, but I didn't recall any of that. But indeed, the fact that we were there and the new management had cleared out everybody else, and we pretty much had free reign to do whatever we wanted. When you combine that with the fact that we just started to know each other, we didn't have our timing down, the characters that we were playing on the air weren't clearly defined as to who's going to take the lead here or there. About the only thing we had done was divvy up the board. We were sitting at an old Gates board, and off to my left was the music, and off to Ross's right were the commercials. So I handled the mic switch and so on. He handled the volume for the music, and we just divvied it up that way. So that, but yeah, we were pretty. It was kind of a stream of conscious thought in a lot of that, and you're correct. You're correct. That was there were just those little pearls and so on. But when you think about where it was and where it went to, and we got a lot slicker and better timing and better everything. Even the WABC tape of the first day, I could go back and point out to you some of the micromanaged intrusions that took place in the verbal structure of what we did that were not conducive to our timing. In several of the bits, the average listener would have no clue because, well, they didn't get the same memos that we got. But it got better and better as basically as I ignored more and more memos.
That's always the key, or at least it seems like it in some of the stories in your book. So you've got a new book out, 50 Stories, 50 Years in Radio, and it's easy to get. Just go to Amazon and type in Brian Wilson-radio, and it comes up on the search. So I guess you've been in radio, I mean, by my calculation, 53 years, but the book is called 50 Stories, 50 Years in Radio. But there's a lot of fun stuff in there, especially if you're a radio geek, like a lot of us are that listen to Rewound Radio on Saturdays. So as I mentioned to you before, it's almost written in a way that's like a radio show. I mean, not just the stories themselves, but the way you write them is, to me anyway, very reminiscent of listening to you on the radio.
Well, thanks. I don't. I really don't know any other way to do it. If I'm writing emails or commercials or articles for the different websites that I contribute to from time to time, I don't know any other way to do it. It seemed to work out pretty well for radio, so why shouldn't it work in print?
Right.
Although there are some things, sarcasm does not live at all, doesn't play well at all in print. Unless you've got icons and italics and different punctuation marks and so on to let people know it's just kidding, it's a joke, get that across. But I'm happy to say that of all the people who have read the book and have commented on it, no one has said, "Well, that really sucks." I can't really think so. I'm happy about that, and it's there's I wanted to be funny. I wanted it to be real and funny because everything that's in there, every one of those stories, actually happened exactly the way I describe it, from the young woman who called me up and shot herself to getting the kids dessert, to some of the interesting words I've used on the air over the years. That's just the way it is, and I'm happy with it. I'm pleased with the work. Thank you for putting it up there on the website.
Let's do a couple of them here, just because I think that's what people are interested in hearing, is some of these stories. But you got to get the book to get the whole thing. But we'll do a few of them here. So since we just did WABC, you have quite a few stories in there about WABC, both getting the job and what it was like when you were there, and some of the stuff that went on toward the end. In any event, I think most radio people would like to know what it was like when you get what you call the call to come to WABC. So how about that one for openers? Well,
it was, it's one of those things where, at least for me and my truly imperfect memory, that, I can remember with absolute precision some things that happened and absolutely nothing about others. And for example, in that particular case, when we got the call, I don't remember what time of year it was. I think it had to have been somewhere in the fall. And I don't know what day of the week it was, I don't remember what month it was. I just know we came out of doing the show at Z93 in Atlanta. When you came out of the control room, in order to go anywhere, you had to go past the receptionist desk. She answered the phone. She had all those little pigeonholes with while you were out, things sticking out of them. Of course, all pre-voicemail and computers and all, 1980. And there was this thing, and I went there. There was a bunch of them, and I riffled through them. And the last one, which was the first one actually, was please call. Jake Clark. While you were out, Jake Clark called. And please call. And that was another aspect of it. I never kept up with who was going where, doing what in the business. We just kind of glanced at Billboard or Radio and Records, and that was about it. But Ross made a real study of it. And I said, do we know someone, do we know Jay Clark? Who's Jay Clark? And he knew right off. Yeah, he's the program director at WABC. I said, well, Jay Clark wants to talk to us. And we went back in the room and called him up, and he was staying at the Hyatt down the street. Said that he'd been in town a few days, wanted to know if we'd like to get together and have breakfast, talk about coming to New York. Well, that's it. Why else would Jay Clark be calling a two-man disc jockey team in Atlanta on a top 40 station if that wasn't going to be the topic of conversation? And unfortunately, as I bring out in the book, we had a commitment to make an appearance at one of Atlanta's biggest high schools. I had like a enrollment of a couple thousand, and they had Occupation Day, Junior Senior Day, and we were regular speakers out there to explain to everyone how they too could starve to death in a career in radio.
Yes.
And it was great. It was, half shtick, half real, but we got the code. So I told him, when Jake came on the phone, I said, well, it's very nice of you, Jay. I said, we'd love to have lunch with you, but we've got this thing at noon, but we could probably meet you over there at the Hyatt at 1:30. And he couldn't do it. He had a flight out at like 2:30. And so I said, well, that's showbiz. Sorry, maybe the next time you're in town, we can chat or something like that. And I think Jay was a little put off by that. Who turns down WABC?
I was about to say, who says, well, I don't know if I can make that. The timing isn't right. We're talking about WABC here, so
yeah.
The initial salvo, you actually don't go and speak with him.
Yeah, no, we had that appointment, and I got to say, I never looked at my career as a career. I never looked at the things I did, the things we did, the things I did with other partners or whatever as stepping stones, or, well, if we do this and we do this for so long, if we get a 10 share or the TSL goes up or whatever, that means we can parlay that into, I just never thought about that. The idea was to go on the air, have a lot of fun, do what you do, get paid a lot of money, as much as you possibly can, and if the radio gods smile on you and kick you up to a bigger market with bigger money, bigger audience, bigger times, bigger opportunities, hooray. If it didn't, no, it was all right. I was having fun on the air, and that was really what it was all about. Sit in a room that's about yo big, got a bunch of records, a couple of turntables, a microphone, say things that people will laugh at, take a paycheck, go home. Wow, tough job. So it didn't as much as, and I guess what I didn't put in the book is that between the receptionist's desk and the conference room where we were able to close the door and get on the phone, knowing, as I made mention a moment ago, that it was pretty obvious why Jay Clark or whoever was the new program director after Rick was calling us, was because of the turnover that was going on up there. And I made a quick analysis in that 4 minutes, to walk from here and dial up and so on. Is, do I want to go to New York? I born and raised there, left when I was 19 to transfer to LSU after Fairleigh, and I've been to Greenwich Village, I've been to Long Island, I dated a girl in the Hamptons, I've been through the Lincoln Tunnel, I've been stuck in the Holland Tunnel, I've been on the George and the Martha, I've been to Radio City Music Hall, and I've seen Broadway plays. And I said, so what's the attraction? It was a career attraction. It was WABC. I mean, how do you, it's the Mountain Muhammad thing. How could you possibly turn that down? Well, I'll tell you how, because we were doing great in Atlanta. I mean, we were kicking ass in Atlanta. We were making probably 3 times more money off the air doing our nightclub thing and weddings and bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and corporate Christmas parties and New Year's Eve parties, things along that order. Atlanta was growing leaps and bounds. Everybody coming into town was between 18 and 54, right in our target demo. All the guys were great and smart and had college educations. All the girls were intelligent and wonderful on birth control. And what more could you ask for? So it was that was it. I mean, we were kicking ass. We were rising stars. We were the in show to listen to. And
yeah, but it's still WABC.
Well, that's pretty much what I said.
That's who's calling.
Ross said, I don't believe you. You said we can't get there. I said, well, he'll come back. It's like brought out in the book. That's exactly what I said to Ross. Look, when they want you, they come get you. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, Jay called back, and he flew back, and we sat down at the airport at Hartsfield in a little room and chatted it up and talked all about various and sundry, and pretty much that's when the deal was done.
Wow. I mean, that is the call that every DJ wants to get, and we heard the results of it just now in the DJ Hall of Fame. Another great story, and there are several on WABC that we just won't get to here. It's why you should read the book. But the one that I think most people could relate to is the Howard Cosell cigar story.
Well, Howard, it won't come as any surprise to anyone. Howard did not radiate humility at any point that I ever ran into him. He was 6'14", always sporting a monstrous cigar that only the EPA could hate, and we really didn't have that many run-ins with him. You'd see him walking across the hall or through the lobby or whatever. But speaking of sports, it was pre-recorded. We ran it every morning, and that was it. There was a couple of occasions when he and Jay and Al Racco, the GM, and Dan and Ross and I were at a couple of functions, ad club functions, things like that, all at the same table. And needless to say, Dan and Jay and Al and Howard talked to each other, and Ross and I kind of held hands, and that was about it. So, but we We went to we had the lunch. There was a restaurant, very nice restaurant that the company maintained on the top floor of the ABC building, and it was partitioned off so that when ad agency people or whomever salespeople want to romance somebody, they could go up there and have a grand time. And we were in on several of those with ad agencies and so on, and that was the occasion to be up there. And lunch was over and everybody left, and I was like the last man standing. And eventually I got on the elevator and I was alone, and it stopped a couple of floors down, and here comes Howard. Okay. He's got his coat on, he's got his cigar going and whatever. And I said, this elevator starts down. I said, I knew he was an attorney, and I saw the plaque up on the wall. And
the plaque said no smoking, right?
No smoking. That's right. Yeah.
Right.
So it was more out of curiosity than anything else. I wasn't trying to pick a fight, but it was just out of curiosity. Here's a guy's an attorney, and there's a guy's plaque on the wall that says it's against the law to do all this stuff and get fined $1 million and go to prison and all the rest of that if you do. And he's just puffing away, like some steel mill in Pittsburgh. So I said, Howard, I think this plaque there, it's. No smoking, it is. I've been smoking on this thing for years and nobody's complained. Yeah, who's going to complain to Howard Cosell, right? Some secretary's going to say, no, ain't going to happen. So I said, well, the plaque says what it says. You're an officer of the court, member of the bar. Nothing. He didn't pay any attention. He just kept puffing away, and the elevator stopped at the 8th floor where the station was, if folks don't know that. And I got off and I went to my office and I filled out the form necessary to file a complaint against somebody who's smoking on the elevator. And it was the next day or the day after. We were wrapping up the show. It was probably around 8:45. And I think John Maher or Art Athens came in to do the news, and they opened the door. Shoo! There goes Howard, zooming down the hall, towards Al Racco's office.
Al Racco being the GM of WABC.
The GM, I'm sorry, yes. He was the GM at the time.
Right. So basically your boss. Yeah.
Yeah, the local Uber boss. All the rest are here upstairs or over in the Burlington building. So I kind of had a suspicion that might have something to do with the form that I had filed the day before, but I didn't know that for a fact. But like I said, about 10 minutes later, just before we were going to our last record, that's usually when Ron came in. Ron Lundy came in, and of course, you know Ron. I think everybody's seen a picture of Ron. He had that big smile, it just lit up the room, and he was such a great guy and a great guy to hand off to in the morning. And he came in with this big smile on his face, and he watched over his shoulder until the airlock, the door closed, and he said, "All right. What did you do?" And it's what? And he said, Howard. And right about that time, there goes Howard again. Shoot! He goes shooting the other way. So I told, I think it was Art. This is Art and Ron and Russ. I said, well, this is what happened. I think Carl Albanese was the engineer, and I told the story, and everybody laughed. When we walked out of the studio, and there was the page. Brian Wilson, please come to my office. It was Al Racco. And I went back, and he was trying to be stern. He's trying to give me the GM thing, but I basically related the story to that, and he said that Howard had been fined $150. And wasn't all that happy about it. And I said, it was simple: quit smoking, or at least quit smoking on the elevators.
Or at least follow the rules that everybody else is supposed to be following.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really the point, right?
Well, why not? Hey, it's equal justice for equal, all the rest of that. Yeah, I'm all about that.
All right.
So that was Howard.
So you got to New York after being at Z93 with Ross, and you had a lot of success there. So I want to just play you a little bit of audio here, okay. And then you can tell us what the significance of this was. You ready? Here we go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, time for the Ross and Wilson dance lessons. When we were doing the nightclub we did in Baton Rouge was pretty plebeian. Not as a bad reflection on people in Baton Rouge, more of a reflection on the fact that we hadn't developed anything really seriously developed, anything seriously funny that had any continuity to it or anything like that. We just basically up on stage and winged it. You know, a lot of like so many of our early shows were like.
Right. So you're doing this appearance or multiple appearances in Atlanta as a consequence of the success you were having at Z93. So that's basically the setup here, right?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that the Baton Rouge Act was where it all got started, and of course we certainly wanted to pursue that once we got to Atlanta. And as it turned out, that a lot of the disco owners in Atlanta were hiring the higher profile DJs from the different stations to come in and DJ at the club, because they would bring in their own listeners, followers, drinkers, dancers, things like that.
Right.
So I got hired to do one of those, and one thing led to another. We started doing the act, and we started doing it together eventually, and we really didn't have anything to do. We didn't have any setup, and to just stand up there in the DJ booth and play a couple of records and say something stupid or funny or whatever on the over the PA was not exactly cutting it for what they were paying us, which was pretty nice. And so we invented the disco lessons, the dancing lessons. The disco was real hot. We needed something simple to get everybody off their ass and get them out on the floor, and they could meet girls and meet boys and do whatever came after that, but just barely have some fun and announce our presence, make our presence known, who we were, what we did, and all the rest.
The Ross and Wilson dance lessons, right?
Disco dance lessons. That's right.
Yes. Okay.
I stayed up in the booth. Ross got down on the floor. Everybody came out. Come on. Let's get on the floor. We're going to do dance lessons here. Of course, everybody knew what was coming eventually. And after about 2 weeks, so they got out. And I don't recall off the top of my head right now, but the disco version of YMCA, the album cut, has an intro that's significantly longer than what we would play on the air.
Right, that was what I just played just now because you had it in the book, and it starts out with that YMCA thing, which
that is correct.
Which just gets everybody's attention because they know exactly what it is at that point.
Yeah, especially if you let a minute or so or 30 seconds pass and you let the music run out. Obviously, at the disco, at any of those places, it's just continuous music, just segue. And this was an opportunity to get everybody's attention. So we give it 10 or 15 seconds, let the last record run out, and then punch that up. And as you just played, this YMCA. And like I say, after about 2 nights, people just start pouring down on the floor, and needless to say, everyone knows how to do the YMCA, at least by that point in time of disco's evolution. And but I get Ross up there, and I introduce my partner, Ross, Disco to the Beat Britain, is going to teach everybody now how to do the YMCA. So let's all get in a line and stuff like that. It's Y, it's the M, it's the C, it's the A. All the while the the intro rather, is playing in the background. And the whole idea was to talk it up right to the vocal, like anything else, and let everybody do their thing. And they did. And it was great. And everybody's out there doing it. And people who had just been sitting around consuming vast quantities at the bar, things along that order, actually got off their butts and got out there. And it was real popular. It was one of our 2 main features.
And the other one, which I just love the name of this, the Ross and Wilson Turgidly Erotic Kissing Contest, which I guess you were doing that at the same time or the same appearances, but I just love the name.
Well, it was we usually were up there for 90 minutes, then we would break for an hour and go back for another 90 minutes, or we would do one long set. Nobody really dictated to us exactly what to do, but we would try to get both events in, do the dance thing first so that everybody would get out there and get worked up and do their number. And then we did the kissing contest, and that had a variety of endings to it.
One of them you describe in some detail, I might add, but
yeah, that was one of the last ones before we left it. Fortunately,
I wonder why that was. But on a more serious note, though, you made an interesting point, and this is for the radio people in the audience here. Not necessarily those who've worked in the business, but those who are followers of it. And at that time in Atlanta, at Z93, from an income perspective, you commented in the book at some point that you were making as much or more money from those appearances where you did the dance lessons and the kissing contests and so forth than you were on the radio.
That is correct.
Which is
absolutely correct. And I'll be,
yeah.
It's been so long ago. I think the statute of limitations has run out. I can tell you that when we went to Atlanta, we went there for $30,000 apiece. And the program director at the time wrote later that he was just appalled that the general manager agreed to that amount of money for these two guys. He subsequently left the station, and shortly after that, our 1-year agreement came up, and there's a number of other things that happened there. Boston happened at the time, and all the rest. I'd have to read about that. And I think we got kicked up to 50 for the next 2 years on a 2-year contract. And I can tell you flat out that we were making 2 to 3 times that off the air on these other appearances because we got paid in cash. That was it.
Yeah.
Even IBM or Honeywell or some of these other big businesses that pay, they just write us a check. And that was it. So, hooray for us.
And as a libertarian, that was right up your alley, even back in 1980.
All taxes are theft. Alan. That is absolutely correct.
Yes, I'm familiar with your talk radio career too. And all right. So anyway, that's Z93, and there's a bunch of other stories in there too, and a very poignant one, which I would leave for people to read in the book about the Fantasy Island contest and the handicapped girl, and very, very nice story. So, all right. So. That
was good, and Phil Necro needs a major shout out for that, for all the help he gave us getting that done. That was a great experience, great moment.
You got to read that. That's in the book and very poignant and so forth. So, all right, I'm going to do another audio thing, and you can tell us the significance of this one.
Okay.
Now, I know that this has some meaning to you.
Just a gigolo.
Yeah.
All right, so the Just a Gigolo bit, I'll let you tell that story here at Rewound Radio.
Okay, this was post Ross and Wilson. I was in it. Ross left, and about 6 months later, I left and got picked up by B104, a CHR station in Baltimore of some repute, kind of like Z93, struggling against some competition. And I'll spare you all the minutia from all that happened up to that point, but I picked up another partner that wasn't too thrilling, and ultimately we got to this point where I was on the air, he wasn't, and we did this. Everybody got into David Lee Roth's Just a Gigolo. I don't know what it was. It never. I don't know that it ever cracked the top 20, but it was mighty popular down there. And when we first started playing it, I'd be answering the phone, and there'd be somebody at the end of the phone singing along with the song. So I put them on the air, and that led to more people calling and being on the air. So every Friday, as the show and the bit started to get a little hair, I just did it on Friday. And that was the Friday morning sing along, and people would call me. Well, I captured one. John Nolan was the board op at the time, and we caught that. And it's up there. It's connected to the book goes to one of the YouTube channels, and that's exactly the way it happened. These people calling in, and I'm just going down the line. Hold on, go ahead. Hold on, go ahead. Hold on, go ahead. Singing along with them, and I did my damnedest to try and break them up, to try and get them off the lyric, say something aside that would make them laugh, and so on. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Yeah, but that was the whole point, wasn't it? In other words, they're supposed to be singing the song, and your job is to try and break them up so they can't get through it.
Yeah, I mean, who wants to listen to somebody else sing the song?
Exactly, right. That's what made it funny, because you're in the background making these, spontaneous, off-the-cuff comments about whoever's doing the singing, and they're trying to maintain concentration, and you can just hear what happens next.
Yeah, and it was a great challenge. It was the challenge to the caller, of course, was to get through and to sing and try and stay with the song. The challenge to John was to keep the levels right so everybody could be heard. My challenge was to listen to what they were doing and where they were in the lyric, and then try to come up with something that would knock them off key. What would they say about you? They say you had a cute butt.
Especially if it was a female who was doing the singing.
Yes, she was. She was very. I got to know her actually. She unfortunately died several years ago, but she was a very talented lady. She Someday I'll send you the drop that she recorded for me.
Oh.
It was, but anyway, that was she was good. She was great and very dependable to call up and know that you'd always have somebody on the phone that could actually sing the song, carry a tune, knew the words, and all the rest. So that was fun.
The other very fun story that you tell from B104, impossible trivia.
Yeah, you say that, and I know I wrote the story, and I know I lived the part, but it's still funny to me.
Anybody who ever worked in radio and was doing some silly contest, and as I say, we got a lot of radio people listening here on Saturdays at Rewound Radio, so it's that much funnier if you've got a little background. So go ahead.
You're right.
Yeah.
You are exactly right.
Right.
As a matter of fact, on the WABC air check that you played, the embryo of that idea was actually heard, when I told Ross that because of our grand debut and we'd made it to New York, WABC, one of the greatest radio stations, if not the greatest radio station in the entire world, was going to give away $1 million to the ninth caller. At this end, no.
Right.
Ross did his tamp down thing, and all the rest. At B104, everybody was doing trivia, and it was boring as hell because they played it straight, and that was, if I had any real purpose or direction in my career, it was to not do stuff straight, not commercials, not weather forecasts, not traffic. Don't do it straight. Everybody does it straight. It's boring as hell. You want to stand out, be different, hopefully make people laugh or curse or cry or get some sort of reaction. So everybody's doing this trivia thing, and I said, all right, we're going to do impossible trivia. Impossible trivia is going to start with $100,000 in the jackpot. Every time we get a wrong answer, we're going to add $100,000 to the jackpot. This is going to be the largest cash giveaway of any radio station ever did, anywhere, anytime.
Right. It's this astronomical amount of money, which is just insane. And you're promoting this like it's the real deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We ran. I cut and ran promos that ran in other day parts. You listen to Brian and O'Brien tomorrow. Blah blah blah. The possible trivia jackpots up to $900,000. Blah blah blah. But the secret behind it all, without giving away what the hell we're talking about the stories. The secret to it all was to word the impossible trivia question, the subject, whatever the question was, in such a fashion that you could not give the answer in the 5 seconds or 10 seconds or whatever it was, that I allowed. So one of the first ones we did was, a woman goes, okay, you're going to do the thing. Okay, here we go. In 5 seconds, recite the alphabet backwards.
Right. That's what made it so funny. Right.
And it was X, Z, Y, sorry, time's up, whatever. Well, that's why we call it impossible trivia. Well, tomorrow we got $200,000 next time we play and so on. And the thing about it was, the other part of it was for the radio people, that especially people who've been in radio can understand this stuff, is that this actually went on for like a week and a half. And we were up to like $2 million.
I mean, talk about water cooler conversation going on.
Oh, baby, this was gold.
This is what you live for. This kind of attention and reaction and response, and
exactly.
And you got this huge number, and it's getting bigger every day because nobody could possibly win. So,
but everybody thinks they can. Right. Everybody thought they could. Everybody thought they could do it. Come on, I can do it. I got whatever. I can do it. It's okay. Name the American presidents. Go.
In 10 seconds, right?
Maybe you can, but you're going to do it in 10 seconds.
Right.
And then they complain about it. You say, well, it's impossible.
That's right. That's
so
why
I get off the air. I get called in the office. The general manager says, "What's this impossible trivia thing? What are you talking about?" And I laid it out for him, and he went ballistic. What are you going to do if somebody wins? They can't win, boss. It's impossible. What do you mean it's impossible? I just went around in circles like that. He was just like a caller. He was just like anybody I would have met at the bar. What are you going to do if somebody wins? Nobody's going to win. How do you know that? Because it's impossible. Just kept examining examples like that over and over. And when he finally ran out of gas or adrenaline or both, he said, all right, well, we can't afford the exposure. If somebody gets it, we're going to be in deep trouble. And if nobody gets it and it just keeps going and going, then somebody's going to say it's a fraud and we had no intentions of giving it away in the first place.
I mean, that was the real risk, I think, really, because nobody could possibly do any of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, certainly not today, but I would like to have asked an attorney, a broadcast attorney,
right?
So well, why not? I mean, we've got a legitimate question, we've got a legitimate timing, we've stated the rules, and no one's prevented from doing it. If you can, I know a guy who can recite the alphabet backwards in about 3 seconds. That's where I got the idea. But who else can do that?
Right.
So that was the whole idea, and it was. But I've always been fascinated and a little perturbed by management that doesn't have the guts, to go forward with something. Yeah, it's a little edgy, it might be a little exposure, but at least have the intellectual capability to understand that. A better answer would have been, let me call, the station was owned by Scripps Howard. Let me call the corporate attorney and ask him.
Right, at least look into it. Right.
Yeah. Of course, I would have said, well, don't bother, because he's going to say, no, attorney doesn't want to take the risk of having to get that type of thing. But I tell you somebody who I think would have allowed us to do it, and that would have been Dean Thacker.
At Z100?
Yeah. See, when he was GM when I first went there, and unfortunately he left shortly, within weeks or so or months of going, he went up to corporate ladder. But he had perception, brains, empathy, experience, understanding. He knew what a tiger he had by the tail there across the river, and I'm positive he would have said, okay, but you damn well better make sure that's impossible.
You better make sure nobody wins. Well, you said that in the book, you say the GM basically said you got to get out of this. So you said to the GM, look, I got a way to do it. And he said, what? And he said, I just guarantee you're going to love it, and you don't tell him what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And go ahead, tell us how you did finally get out of it.
I set it up with, I had the caller come in, same deal, and ask the question, and right at this moment, brain fart. I don't have the exact question. It was something like, who co-starred with John Wayne in I Want to Beat Your Cow or whatever.
But the point was the guy gets it right.
Bam!
That's
right
right.
off.
He gets it right. So now this impossible trivia, whatever this jackpot by now is what, like $9 million or some crazy.
And he said that. And I said, oh my God, you won. And the guy's kind of low key, and he said, well, that's great. He said, boy, my Uncle Jim's down there. He's really going to be fascinated at this. Your Uncle Jim down here? Who's your Uncle Jim? Well, my Uncle Jim Fox, the general manager, your boss. Oh, Dave, I'm really sorry. You've heard the rules broadcast over the station, various times through the day, that employees and relatives of WBS of B104 are not eligible for our prizes. Oh, I never heard that.
Yeah.
Well, you check with your Uncle Jim, and he'll tell you. So I'm sorry, but I can't award you the prizes.
Right.
Oh well.
So
turns out the guy that I set it up with was our chief engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty nice guy, low key, typical engineer type, and he played it perfectly, and we were done. And that was the last one.
And as you said, you promised the general manager he'd love it, and I'm sure he did.
Oh, he was thrilled. No legal fees, no more exposure.
You got out of it. And you got to actually have somebody, we'll put it in quotes, win, at least for 30 seconds or something. I mean, I would think that everybody driving around in their car listening to B104, who's been listening to this impossible trivia thing for the previous, whatever it was, 2 weeks, and suddenly for this brief moment in time before, the bit about he's the general manager's nephew, before that comes out, there's this, 15, 20, 30 seconds where people are thinking, oh my God, somebody just won $9 million.
I tell you, the gasp caused a tropical depression over the city. It was. The phones blew out. The calls, the letter, everything. They couldn't believe it, and I thought he blah 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 blah. You're exactly right. It was a tremendous reaction. I think it got right up in the paper and all the rest. But Jim was happy that it was over.
Yeah.
It happened on a note where he was a star. He was part of the solution.
That's
so
right.
Hooray for me, Typical management.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the.
I just thought that was just a great story. All right. Let's do another one here now. Not everything is huge, major market radio in this book. I mean, a lot of it is. And I think for radio people, there's always this curiosity, what's going on behind the scenes. And I guess there's something about radio that kind of brings that out because you can't see anything. So you always wonder what happens when the mic goes off. So it's one of the reasons why this book is fun. Anyway, this is another one, but this is not necessarily a major market thing. But it's a fun story anyway, and, well, you'll know here.
Paul Harvey. Good day.
All right, so the Paul Harvey Good Day story.
Oh, I landed a job still in Baton Rouge. This was pre pre-Ross, obviously, pre-Ross and Wilson, at a beautiful music FM station. That's pretty much enough to shock the system of anyone who's ever heard me on the air anyway. But I was PD did the morning show, and the guy wanted to energize the station a little bit, and he was number one actually. The beautiful music station on FM. I mean, they were in every dentist office and. Maybe yours, Alan. Had you been there? The dentists, doctors, lawyers, libraries, all had the station.
Yes, you can't have anything too controversial. They're nervous enough already.
Oh, baby, you got that.
It. That's right.
So we're just playing, lots and lots of music and weather and do little bits every once in a while. But we were the ABC affiliate for Paul Harvey. We had the Paul Harvey franchise on this FM station, and. I don't know where these ideas come from. Was it poor potty training when I was a kid? Was it being raised on a farm? It wasn't drugs.
You know where it comes from? It comes from being spontaneous. And not to take you off the story, but just for a second here, one of my big complaints about radio today is there's no spontaneity. Nobody does anything off the cuff because they happen to catch something or hear something and react to it. And that's because, Paul Harvey always put that gap in between, Paul Harvey, Space Good Day, which is what you're going to tell the story for. And you heard that and in a spontaneous way came up with this bit. And that's what, from my point of view, I just don't hear much of that going on today in radio. So editorial over, go ahead.
Yeah, that's it is unfortunate, but and I can't say enough about spontaneity. Ross and I did a lot of stuff. Don and I did. Bob and I did. The other partners I had. Ross and I probably did more scripted material at the beginning than anyone else, and it was okay. It was good. We carried it off okay. It sounded reasonably spontaneous, but the really great stuff, the really funny stuff, two of those instances happened on the last hour of the air check we played. Ross wasn't aware of it, and it just came to mind, and I did it. And Kiki, Art, John, whoever was in the car, everybody's laughing because it was nothing's more contagious than spontaneous humor.
Right.
People start laughing; they don't even know what the punchline is. You just hear somebody laughing. Anyway, so I had this idea: what would happen? Would anybody notice? If Paul Harvey, because you couldn't really predict when he was going to say good day. If you were a jock at the station, you're going to fire off a card or something, and you wanted to hit it right at good day. You say, "Listen, Paul Harvey, good day," but it might have been Paul Harvey, good day, or it might have been Paul Harvey, good day. So I said, "Man, let's have some fun with this." So I had it down that the ABC fed. Paul Harvey, news and comment at about 20 to 12 Eastern time. And I would have to record it and then back it up and put it into the automation system that ran the rest of the day at this FM beautiful music station. So I got it all down and stuff like that, and I got some of that paper leader tape. If you've ever done anything in radio, those of you listening with razor blades, like Charlie and John and Joe Ted, some of the people that had helped preserve this toxic air check material for the show today. It was paper leader tape, and after he said Paul Harvey, I'd splice in a strip and run it out about yay far and tape it onto the other end. So instead of Paul Harvey, good day, it might have been Paul Harvey, good day, on Tuesday. Well, by Friday, I kept adding more and more leader tape, and I gradually, I think after a week and a half, I worked it up to where it was about a minute. Between Paul Harvey, then you had dead air.
Right.
Of course, it didn't matter on an FM station. You were getting any particular problems there, and then all of a sudden, if you're going down the road and you haven't noticed, all of a sudden out of nowhere, good day.
Right. Right.
And on that last day, right after the good day, the hotline rang, and it was Kenman Stanley. He was the general manager and part owner of the station, and he's laughing. I knew it had to be somebody important because it was the hotline number. Not too many people have your hotline number, and he finally got control of himself. He said, "Funniest thing you ever heard. I know exactly what you're doing. Yeah. Stop." Right. Stop. Right. He said, if the network hears that, any of the affiliate people coming through, something like that, we could lose the franchise. But he said that was really funny.
Well, it's exactly as you described. He would always take that break, and I don't know how many typical listeners were picking up on this. There must have been some people, but you say in the book you couldn't believe that you weren't getting any phone calls about this.
Yeah, about the third day, I got one call. I think it was on Thursday after the Monday I started. I got one call from a guy that says, excuse me, just calling, is Mr. Harvey ill?
Right.
I said, why do you ask? He said, well, it's just his voice sounds a little strained. Oh, no, he's fine. Thank you. Goodbye. I thought you were calling about the gap.
He's just waiting longer and longer and longer to say good day. All right. So anyway, we're talking to Brian Wilson here at Rewound Radio. This is Alan sniffing about his brand new book. You can get it on Amazon, 50 Stories, 50 Years in Radio. Just go to Amazon and do a search for Brian Wilson Radio. I did it, and it comes up as about the third link, and not very expensive. It's a real fun read, and it's not all jokes. A lot of it is, but it isn't all. One of the things that you got involved with in later years after the switch, you became a talk radio host as opposed to a DJ, and you talk about that in the book. But I think one of the most interesting things about your career, 53 years and counting, was VRINK, Vacation Relief Incorporated. And I have to tell you, Brian, I never knew what the INK was. I would see the ads for VRINK, and I knew who you were, obviously, from ABC, et cetera, and so forth. But I didn't know the VR part, the Vacation Relief, but I never knew the INK. Well, it's for Incorporated, but you just put a K at the end instead of a C. Anyway, what a great idea. Why don't you just, because again, this is in the book too, and you talk about how you got the idea to do it, and so many stations you filled in for, and it led to full-time gigs and the whole thing. But why don't you tell us a little bit about VRINK?
Well, I have to credit Verizon with the seed. I was coming back from an interview at WBAL in Baltimore. Ron Smith had been interviewing me on my second book, The Little Black Book on Whitewater. And I was listening to the radio, of course, and stuff like that, and on comes this commercial. Now, this is 1994, I believe, somewhere around in there. And it was that you too can get ISDN service in your home. This is the newest, greatest, hottest, fastest internet access portal available. So much better than dial-up and blah, 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 blah. Well, I knew about ISDN lines, the radio station and stuff, but I thought they were intolerably expensive and really didn't know a whole lot about it. But listening to that, I said, well, if I can get that in the house, and I've got an internet connection where I can go sign on to anybody's website anywhere around the country, then I've got the voice quality, which would give me the local presence, the in-studio presence, to fill in for talk show hosting. Unlike music radio, you just get some guy off the weekends or increase the number of songs per hour you're going to play, and that'll cover for when your expensive morning man goes on vacation or something like that. But talk radio, you've got to have somebody in there that's reasonably intelligent, moderately informed, somewhat articulate to be able to carry the ball, Monday through Friday. So, and there weren't that many people around. So I called Verizon. Yes, they could have it at my location. I called one of the engineering types at WBAL, said, what do I need besides a microphone? He told me. And I swear I went out that afternoon. I bought a Behringer board, a really good microphone, and some Sennheiser headsets, and waited for the Verizon guy to come and put it up. And I got in touch with a guy who's a very good friend who's now in Dallas. Tyler Cox was the program director that hired me in Washington, and subsequently went with ABC in Dallas. And I said, look, I got this idea. And I laid it out for him, and I thought he must have come out of his chair, because he had just brought in a guy from Washington with whom we both worked, and had to pay him like $4,000 to get him to fill in for another guy we worked for in Washington, Mark Davis, who was on vacation, doing middays. And because that's $4,000, he said, well, I had to pay him, had to pay for his plane ticket, had to put him up in a hotel, had to feed him, water him, all the rest of that. Yeah, it was $4,000. Well, at that time, I hadn't decided what my rate was going to be, but I said, well, if you've got the means to pay somebody $4,000 for a week in talk radio, terrific. I'm all for that. So anyway, so I told him the idea, and he said it was great. And he said, I'll be your best client. I said, well, just call me when you're ready. And that's where that was the start of the of the program. Then the program director, station manager WBAL heard about it in a subsequent conversation. So I'm filling in for Mark Davis in Dallas. I'm filling in for Ron Smith and Alan Prell at WBAL in Baltimore. Eventually, Phil Boyce contacted me for fill-in at WABC. The Rewound that I did with the infamous Dan Ingram interview was done through the same mechanism. I was on a farm that I owned at the time in upstate New York, and it all worked remarkably well. I did a year at KCMO in Kansas City, 7 years on KSFO in San Francisco.
Yeah, that was the amazing one.
Studio.
7 years. You're doing a show on KSFO San Francisco from, I think you said you were living in Maryland or something at the time. And
yeah.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. But the point is, you're on the East Coast, you're doing this show for San Francisco on the West Coast, and you're never at the radio station. You're doing it all remotely through your studio at home on this ISDN line.
That's correct.
I mean,
that is correct.
That's really pretty cool stuff.
The big time was not to give away the baby with the bathwater, but the big time came. It was 98, 99, somewhere around in there. I actually wasn't paying that close attention to my calendar, and Tyler called from WBAP, asked me to fill in for Mark. That was going to be 9 to noon Central Time. Then I had my KSFO show on the West Coast that was from 4 to 7, and then Jeff Beauchamp called from BAL and asked me to fill in for Ron Smith from 3 to 6 Eastern Time. And I was doing a morning show that was ostensibly supposed to be a fill-in for 90 days, turned into a year at KCMO in Kansas City. So I did KCMO Morning Drive from 6 to 9. Then I did Mark Davis from 10 to 1 Eastern Time. Then I did Ron Smith from 3 to 6. And then I did my show at KSFO from 4 to 7. Western Time, Pacific Time.
How did you keep the call letters straight? I mean,
well, that's what computer screens are for.
I guess so.
Call letters and phone numbers and all the rest. But that went on for like 3 weeks, from a week before Christmas till a week after New Year's.
And this is talk radio here. I mean, this is where you've got to be engaged. You have to know the issues. You have to be able to stimulate the audience and respond to what the callers are saying. And talk radio is a whole different deal from playing music because you're so engaged. And how many hours a day were you doing this under those circumstances? I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Well, I think if you're worth your salt as a talk show host, you probably spend more time preparing than you do doing. There's, especially now, especially if you trace the development of the internet and websites and cable TV and the degeneration of what we used to call news, just in general, there's so much to read, so much to know, so much to be aware of. You got to separate the wheat from the chaff, the bull from the and that kind of thing, so that you can make a cogent presentation. Having a basic libertarian position on things, it gives you the opportunity to, I report, you decipher, that type of thing. But it was not. I was never an ideologue in that regard. It was more interesting to explore, both sides and try and find a common ground of disagreement, and then analyze whether or not that's accurate.
Wait a minute. Did you
your
say
opinion, my opinion? Who
Did
cares?
you say common ground in talk radio? I didn't think that was possible anymore.
It's not. It's not possible. What's possible is that that the caller and the host can find a common part of the subject on which they agree or from which they can start. And then you take it from there. And eventually, just like, what they teach you in, I think it was geometry class that I'm sure I flunked, if you start at a point and you start drawing a line, and one line separates by some degree from the first line, that by the time you go out 2 miles, you're in different states. That whatever that example is, that mathematical exercise may be. But the same thing happens with talk radio. Most of the people who are in talk radio, whether it's Rush or Sean or Mark, it doesn't really matter. They're ideologues. Okay, great, hooray for you. But they have said things over the years and quite recently that in specific factual instances are they're dead wrong, or they're remarkably oblique. They don't reflect the position that they are espousing. What they're saying is fine for them, fine for their audience, fine for their believers. But you can eventually get to a point of factual analysis, objective analysis, logical analysis, where you can say this can't possibly be true.
Right.
Or this is absolutely correct. There aren't a lot of those because everybody's motivated by their own opinion, their own emotions. And you got an opinion. What was that Senator, whatever his name said? You're entitled to your own opinion, but not to your own facts.
Yeah, well.
And that's where I begin. Let's get down to the facts and leave the talking points and all the things people talk over and yell about and so on. That makes the cacophony of sound when you're actually trying to learn something or hear something, and everybody's talking at one time. Just the hell with this. It's Tower of Babel all over again.
And you're still doing, I know you're doing a podcast at this point. Beyond that, are you doing any other kind of radio, talk radio, whatever?
No, I think the general assumption in the trade is that I've hung up the headphones and that's about it. And that's not, have you retired? Are you between jobs? Are you on the beach? What exactly is the status?
The infamous beach. Yes.
Yeah. So I would, the podcast, I stopped the podcast about 4 months ago. I was doing a weekly podcast with Judge Andrew Napolitano at Fox called Judging Freedom, and we were having a lot of fun, but that was just one part of his day out of the week, and he had a lot of pressure building to do other things on other shows on Fox, and his time became extremely rare and limited. So I just said, well, why don't we just take a breather and see whether things calm down to a point we can always fire it back up again. And I'm thinking after the first of the year, I may start something that's more regular and not dependent upon one person, like doing a show with. It was great. I mean, he's a good friend. We have dinner up in New Jersey every once in so often, and I really love the guy. He's a great intellect and a lot of fun to play with on the air. But there are other people that I've come to know over the years in talk radio, like Annie Coulter and Jim Bovard and Lou Rockwell and people like that. And they're brilliant people. They know a hell of a lot more than I do on a lot of stuff. So we get to play patty cake, and everybody comes out better at the end. You
would hope, anyway. But it's got to be tough. From your point of view, after 53 years in the business, to not be doing anything on the air. I would just think it'd be so much a part of you. I'm not talking about the money, and I'm not talking about, coming up with an original technical idea like Vrink or any of that. Just being behind the mic and doing the thing. I would think it'd be hard to go cold turkey on that and not do it anymore.
It is. It is. It was. I'm glad I was able to kind of feather the edge there, and I could really say 53 years and not just, boom, 50 years. Here comes the pension from the union. Here comes Social Security, that kind of thing. Right. But it's difficult, and with all due respect to the people who are doing it today, I have to say that if I just don't hear any really great talk radio being done consistently. I mean, everybody's got their moments. But I used to work with Michael Savage at KSFO in San Francisco before he got syndicated. Strange guy. But he was damn good. He had huge numbers in the afternoon, and people would call just to hear the train wreck. But
that's right. That is what they were calling for, exactly.
Yeah. But I'd like to think that it's possible to do a show where the caller and the host can respectfully discuss particular issues with an idea that we're going to expand the understanding and the knowledge of both the two people on the phone and the people that are out listening. That it doesn't have to be this constant, tug of war. I'm right, you're wrong. Get off my phone. That kind of thing. I loved Joe Pine back when I was a kid. Listened to him all the time. Worked with Bob Grant. I liked his style. I couldn't listen to him. After a while, the whole thing got kind of old.
Right.
And I think there's so much information out there to be able to discuss that information with someone who wants to hear it. If you don't have a hearing ear, if you don't really have that, if you're not really inquisitive, if you don't really want to know the answer, if you just want a forum to be able to spout your own spout, then call Rush, call Sean, be an acolyte, be a sycophant, be a whatever you want to be. But it's redundant and boring. It's just not good radio.
And this from Brian Wilson, a guy who has done it, as opposed to those of us who criticize from the outside looking in. So there's something to be said for that. And speaking of Rush Limbaugh, not going to ask you for the story here, but there is a story about Rush and Wilson that is in the book. Briefly, the most important thing out of this book, in my opinion, is the Brian Wilson's award-winning authentic hot damn chili recipe. And
that's a takeaway.
That comes in the book too. So and it really was award-winning from what you said. So anyway.
Oh yeah, I got Craig Claiborne picture right. In fact, I got it right over here on the desk. A picture of me shaking hands with Craig Claiborne when I won the Gourmet Gala down in Baltimore, and a few other things. But and this is a great time of year to make that chili. I mean, it's getting a little chilly, no pun intended.
Yeah, right.
And it's. This would be a good time to whip up a few hundred gallons. It freezes well, and
the Brian Wilson
you carry
Award.
it around in your car,
The Brian Wilson award-winning, authentic, not just hot damn, but authentic hot damn chili. Anyway, Brian Wilson, look, it's been great talking to you. And once again, this is not War and Peace, this book. This is something you can read each story. There's 50 stories in this book, and there's a little bit about Z100 at the end of it for those who are interested in that. And you just read through one story at a time, take you 5 to 10 minutes, something like that. And you can put it down and pick it up a month later, the whole deal. It's really easy. Just go to Amazon, just type in Brian Wilson Radio on their search thing, and it comes up, as I say, I did that earlier, about 3 links down. 50 stories, 50 years in radio. Pretty cool stuff. So, Brian Wilson, appreciate you being with us, telling us some of those stories, and look forward to hearing you when you appear somewhere, hopefully in the near future.
Alan, thanks. I hope so too, and thank you for being the keeper of the WABC legacy. We're all on the same page. I think that it was the greatest radio station ever for those 20 years, with some of the greatest jocks and promo people, Rick Sklar, people like they were just great folks. And thanks to Charlie and to John and Gary and Joe and Sammy for keeping it all together. I wish I had done as well as they had to keep all that stuff. It was great hearing it again. And thanks again for the time. I appreciate it very much.
All right, Brian Wilson, thank you very much from Rewound Radio.
Rewound Radio, DJ